tech producer for this call. Thank you, Christina, doing a lot of things at once right now. So thank you. But we want to get this recorded for folks.
Okay, we're recording.
Okay, awesome. And we're gonna, before we hand it off to me and the panelists, we are going to just do a quick poll to find out about corporate fundraising and how it is a part of each of your organizations. So Christina, if you can launch the poll, thank you. So it's just one question. What percentage of your fundraising income comes from corporate sponsorships and donations from corporations? I always find these polls so interesting. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Looks like people have answered. I think we have 20 people who haven't answered yet, but that's cool. We're good. Okay, I'm gonna share the results. Hopefully it'll work. So can people see the results so they just know who's here? So it looks like the majority is under half. A lot of you do have corporate donors or sponsors as part of your picture, and a few of you are over 50% corporate sponsors or corporate donations. That's incredible. So, and a few of you are here learning how to make this happen for yourselves. So welcome. I'm gonna stop sharing and get us into the panel. All right. So, we have four amazing women working in corporate philanthropy and corporate giving with us today. I'm thinking if there's a way to pin everybody. I don't know. Christina, is there a way that we can pin? Can you help me with that? Just because we have so many people here that our faces might get lost in the little Brady Bunch grid here. To let each of them introduce themselves, but I'm gonna just name them. We have Valerie Atisha from PNC Bank. We have Stephanie Brady, who just recently left Crocs and is an amazing fundraiser and fundraising consultant. We have Louisa Brown from Cliff Bar and Mondelez, who now owns Cliff Bar. And we have Lisa Shibata from Chipotle. And I've talked to all of them about this topic. They are all phenomenal and interesting people. I can't wait for you to hear what they have to say. So we are going to have each person introduce themselves briefly. I'm going to ask, what is your role in and your company that you work with? What is your role relative to corporate philanthropy, and what led you into this role? Like how did you get here? So I'm going to kick us off with Valerie because she's the first face I see next to my own on the Brady Bunch grid. So Valerie, can you get us started?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And it really is a pleasure for me and for all of the panelists, all of us to kind of be here this morning. I'm Valerie Atisha. I'm the Vice President of Client Community Relations at PNC Bank. In short, I oversee the community footprint for PNC, marketing and communications and branding, as well as all of our corporate and charitable sponsorships and philanthropic giving. I've been in this role for 3 years and came to this role as a result of an acquisition. PNC Bank acquired another bank, and that sort of extended the PNC footprint across 18 new states, California included. I was employee number 4 here at PNC. We have now 144 employees in San Diego County. I oversee specifically, I just oversee San Diego County, Temecula, and Murrieta. I have colleagues who oversee other parts of the country. I came to this role after 22 years as a fundraiser and as a nonprofit executive. So I've been in your shoes. I've been on the other side for most all of my career. I've sat in on these corporate funder panels. And so it really is kind of a pleasure to be here today. In my role, I also oversee board engagement and employee volunteerism and employee engagement. So thank you so much, Elisa, for inviting me here, and I really appreciate it. If I'm gonna just kind of tag Stephanie, because she's like the next person I see on my screen.
Well, thank you. And I echo the sentiments. It's wonderful to be here, wonderful to see so many people participating in this. It's fantastic. As Elisa said, I've just wrapped up my position as head of global sustainability engagement at Crocs. And part of my journey from Crocs has been more than 2 decades. I don't say the 20-year plus, I say two. That makes me feel a little bit better. 2 decades really driving and accelerating impact and purpose at the intersection of business or organizational performance and positioning, whether you're a brand or a nonprofit or a foundation. So I've been doing that for the better part of 20 years. So in addition to Crocs, I've worked closely with Procter & Gamble, Corning, as well as Environmental Defense Fund, United Way Worldwide. So my background around impact and purpose span both climate and community. And I'm really happy to join the panel here. I do have to say that what led me to this work, it's a great question. My background is basically in launching new products, new services for brands. And I got to a point where after driving market share and profits and sales, I really needed to bring my heart into my work. And that really brings me through to sort of driving purpose and impact. But it comes from a very traditional background of money and market share. So, I do bring that lens to a real practical sense of hopefully I can share a little bit about the inside scoop of what corporations are really thinking and how they work and what they look for here today. I'll pop it to, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, good morning, and thank you all for having us all here and joining this webinar, and to Alyssa and Christina for organizing this. And so along with the other great women on this panel, I head up our sustainability program here at Chipotle Mexican Grill. I've been here for about 2 years. And prior to joining Chipotle, I was also on corporate sustainability over at the Walt Disney Company and really focused on climate and water issues. And so I think I'm the one person that is not specifically within a corporate giving role and really got engaged in corporate giving with the environmental aspects of goals on a corporate level. And so our giving is really focused on how does the giving support our environmental goals around climate and water and waste. And I've just always been in environmental sustainability. And it's a new journey in really incorporating the giving pieces on how do we operate with environmental impacts in mind. And I'll pass it to Louisa.
Yeah, I'll close us out here. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Louisa Brown, and I'm the Senior Manager of Community Impact for Cliff Bar, which is now part of Mondelez, a global snacking company. And I've been here for about 7 years. In my current role, I oversee our corporate giving and our employee volunteer program. But I actually started in a different role. I started here leading our employee communications. And my background of what got me here to my current role in community impact for Cliff was I actually spent a decade in the nonprofit sector doing fundraising and communications. And then my kind of transition to sustainable food and agriculture came from a role at UC Berkeley working at their Food Institute, which is their research center for food and ag, and wound up here. And so I'm really glad to be here and can't wait to learn from our other panelists and to be able to share what we know about corporate giving.
Thank you so much, everybody. So everybody can see we have an amazing panel and group of people. before I ask the next question, I'm gonna play with this spotlighting of the speakers. So bear with me for 1 second and see if this works. Okay, oh, that might have worked. So are people seeing Valerie, Lisa, Louisa? Okay. Although, are we just seeing a big Valerie and small everybody else? Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to get all of us. Okay. Is that working?
I
Okay.
can also unpin them if you want
Okay,
a speaker to.
I think the pinning might only show on your own computer because I wasn't seeing it. So I think we have it though, right? We're good? Okay, done. Teamwork. All right. So I'm gonna have everybody share on this one. Let's start with Lisa. Can you tell us about the corporate giving program at Chipotle? What are the programmatic and issue area giving priorities? Why does your company give? And I love that you all just sort of self-decided to self-facilitate. You made my job so easy today, so keep that going. Love it. Thank you. But Lisa, if you can kick us off with that question, that would be great.
Sure thing. And so our program is, as I mentioned, I sit in sustainability, and Chipotle has several environmental goals focused around climate, waste, and water. And one of our climate goals is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. And with that goal, it also means that we have set goals that have an impact on our supply chain and our suppliers and what they're doing in being more sustainable and reducing their impact. As a food company, most of our suppliers are some type of agricultural farmers. And so really looking at what are those resources that we can support that can also support them. And so that's where our giving comes into play as it rolls up into our environmental goals on climate. And similarly, we give around water stewardship and conservation and different measures for efficiencies. And so looking at different programming that can help, again, focus on the agricultural side of things, of what are programs that we can support and projects that are helping with nature-based projects, that can help with groundwater recharge, that can help with different types of technology that can be rolled out to the farmers, or any of that engagement and education and resources that can directly be provided to farmers to help them try out and pilot. I mean, farmers are a group where they don't want to try anything new if somebody else isn't trying it first, and showing them that it can be done, and to really shift the way that they're going about with their practices. And so that's primarily where the environmental side of our giving is focused on. And on the other giving, and this leads to Alyssa's other questions, and so maybe I'll hold off on that, but we also I work very closely with our marketing team. And so again, they'll do different types of giving that supports our larger programs around the brand and the type of work that we do. And so, for instance, when we are launching a new product or a new limited offer on our menus, we may have a focused marketing giving to support that one specific thing. So for instance, last year, or actually 2 years ago, we launched Roblox and Chipotle in Roblox, the gaming platform. And to reduce the impact there on the greenhouse gas emissions on that launch, we did do some giving around the offsets piece, and really trying to tie in on that specific launch of being carbon neutral, because the technology side and the gaming side takes up a lot of energy. And so we would help them look for projects like that. I will facilitate. Stephanie, did you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we're panelists and facilitators. We can do this. We'll wrap it all up. This is fantastic. Yeah, I can give you a little bit of an understanding of Crocs and their giving, which is evolving. And I'm also going to say a little bit about not just funds of giving, but types of nonprofit partnerships that really are important for us to realize what we're doing. So it's not just a straight donation. So certainly Crocs is very well known, knowing there is comfort for the client, comfort for the planet, comfort for people, really take that seriously. And we do donate shoes and funds, especially shoes in times of crisis. So, but we do that through a nonprofit partnership for years we valued called Souls for Souls. And so they are a partner that we really do work very, very closely with to make sure we can donate shoes in times of crisis to those communities, families, children in need as well. But our other sort of giving in that involves, our partnerships also with our retailers. We have very valued retailers, from Dick's to Famous Footwear to DSW. And so we do work closely with them and align, with an opportunity of quote unquote limited edition shoes, like for example, at Famous and their Ticket to Dream, they have their own foundation. So I think our giving is really a range of donating shoes, but also through partnerships that funding it is allowed to be channeled for that. In addition, in terms of our sustainability, because Souls for Souls were so important to us, just donating shoes in times of crisis, whether it's, earthquake, disaster recovery, relief efforts, Souls for Souls were also an important partnership in our sustainability effort, our circularity effort. Crocs recently launched a take-back program in the US piloting where fans across the country can return old Crocs to give them new life. And Souls for Souls, again, was a type of partnership, an enduring nonprofit partnership that continues to evolve. And they were able to, be an important partner where those shoes were sent to them to be sorted. So the really well-loved ones went to our recycler, but the gently used ones that really could still be given a second life for somebody else's feet to wear. There's another program that we were able to connect with. So I think just the range of giving, broaden that to what other partnerships, enablement opportunities, and that's where you can really create some shared value and some more, rather than transactional donations, some really enduring enduring transformational partnerships that at Crocs have been very, very valuable. So that's a little bit about our purview of giving. So Louisa, I'll hand it to you.
All right, thank you. And I'll talk mostly about Clif Bar as it was as a corporate entity. We are finalizing our transition into Mondelez after being acquired, and so that will be shifting to be more of a brand strategy versus corporate. But within our corporate giving strategy, what I've been overseeing, we kind of have three major buckets of impact donations. So we think about our employee time, we think about our product, so our in-kind donations, and then also financial resources. And so on the first bucket with volunteer time, first of all, we support employees volunteering in alignment with their passions and matching donations to those organizations. But when we're going to organize something and put a lot of resources behind it, it is tied to our sustainability goals for the most part. So that includes, like week-long service projects focused on wildfire restoration, for example, coming up in a month here. So it's fresh on my mind. In-kind donations, that strategy historically has been twofold. One is disaster relief and hunger relief. That's where the majority of our product goes. But then we've also had a very grassroots in-kind donation strategy. So supporting smaller nonprofits that are putting on athletic events or taking kids backpacking who've never been before, the sort of thing where you could kind of picture a Clif Bar really serving a purpose. And then when it comes to our corporate giving, I know in some places that are bigger, it's probably split up who's managing different buckets of it. For Clif, I'm the central source of that funding. And so that means I collaborate with different teams. I think of our corporate giving as probably four major buckets. The first is employee engagement. So that supports our matching gifts, that supports the organizations that we volunteer with. It also supports our DEI initiatives. That's one bucket. The second bucket, which is probably the largest bucket, is our brand strategy. And so that's giving to organizations that support our brand values. So for Cliff Bar, that's access to the outdoors and sports. For Z Bar, that's access to outdoor play. For Luna, that's women's wellness. And so they each have a very distinct strategy, and we support nonprofits that help us have a positive impact in those spaces. The third bucket is like organizational or business priorities. So when we think about sustainable agriculture, like will there be oats to put into our bars in 50 years? It's supporting organizations that are looking longer term at sustainability and where our business will need to be. That also sometimes supports partnerships that are important to our customers, and we collaborate together to have an impact. Those are kind of just various business priorities that we're able to support. And then our fourth bucket, which is probably the most flexible, is local support. And so thinking about where our employees are based and being able to create a healthy ecosystem in those communities and supporting organizations that our people care about, but also kind of support our local community relations. And that's probably, that is definitely very locally driven. So those look different based on which community you're looking at. And Valerie, why don't you tell us about PNC?
So a little bit about PNC as a company. So we're a 160-year-old financial institution based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we have consistently been ranked one of the most charitable companies in the United States. And that is very much part of our value system because we want to make communities a better place to live, work, and thrive. We have national priorities, and I'll talk about those in a second. And then we have local priorities. And the differentiation is that I have 53 other counterparts around the country in places like Boston and Chicago and Dallas and Seattle. And PNC recognizes that each of those cities and communities looks very different. So what is important perhaps in Boston or Seattle might not necessarily be important here in San Diego and vice versa. So on a national scale, our primary philanthropic pillar is early childhood education. We believe firmly in investing in programs that support the whole development of a child from birth to age 5. And we do that through a number of different nonprofit organizations. We focus on literacy, we focus on STEM, we focus on cognitive learning, we focus on outdoor play. PNC has committed in 2004, they established our Growth Great initiative and committed $500 million to early childhood education. And that is a commitment that we just celebrated 20 years. And that is a commitment that we are going to continue. We're going to continue moving forward. We also, understanding that 2020 was a year of civil and social unrest, also created we created a fund, the Economic Opportunity Fund, and set aside $1 billion towards supporting and uplifting communities that have been historically marginalized, focusing on economic development, empowerment, entrepreneurship, small business, home ownership, really sort of uplifting communities that have historically been marginalized and really sort of creating pathways for them and their future generations toward wealth. And then we've also got a really robust program focused on arts outreach. So how do we bring access to the arts to communities that can't afford or simply don't have transportation to the arts? So to schools and to prisons and to community centers and senior centers, et cetera. So those are our 3 sort of national philanthropic priorities. And then we've sort of understanding that, again, kind of what makes San Diego different and unique. We have sort of looked at our region and determined that at least for the next 5 years, and we're in year 3, that our funding priorities are going to be focused on the military. And that is really in all aspects. So it could be critical needs, it could be services and support, it could be job transition, it could be anything along those lines. So the military is critical to us here in San Diego, given our huge military population. Also critical needs, understanding it's very expensive to live here. And so we've really focused 2 areas on food insecurity and housing. And then within housing, kind of tied to homelessness. Also, we believe in supporting youth through sports, specifically through soccer. Given that we're a binational region, soccer is the sport in San Diego. We have one of the highest viewerships of the World Cup in the country. And soccer is a year-round sport, but played by lots of different kids. So we believe firmly in supporting kids through youth soccer. And then we've also got a really big funding priority around women and girls. How do we support and engage the next generation of leaders, both younger and older? And then kind of just as a focus on business development, how do we continue to grow? How do we create new opportunities and to kind of meet and networking with new people? So those are our sort of national as well as local philanthropic priorities. And then, Elisa, was there another question to that I missed? I'm trying to think. No.
Just
Yeah,
that's
right.
perfect. That's fabulous. Thank you all. The next question, and I love that people in the chat are actually asking questions that are like questions I'm about to ask. So thank you. Like, I love that we're all thinking the same way. The next question, I'm going to just in the interest of time, I'm going to direct it to Lisa and Louisa to answer. And if Stephanie or Valerie, you have anything really burning you want to add, just add it. But this question is really about mapping the different budgets that philanthropic and charitable and sponsorship dollars come from. I think that one thing when I was doing corporate fundraising that I didn't realize when I started is that, it's not just coming through a family foundation of the company. It's not just one philanthropic budget. Sometimes there were like 6 different people in a corporate entity in totally different departments who didn't even work together, who all had some budget for funding my organization, and mapping that was really new for me. So I would love, let's start with Louisa. Can you give us a sense of what are the different budgets that support nonprofits within Clif Bar? And like who makes decisions about those budgets? And then we'll go to Lisa.
Yeah. So a few years ago, the money did sit in lots of different budgets, and we found that we were actually maybe doubling up, and we had 2 different relationships with the same nonprofit for 2 different reasons. So we actually centralized our budget at Clif, but that doesn't mean that it is entirely mine to make those decisions of where it's going. So I partner with our sales team for some of those partnerships. And so we collaboratively make a decision. I partner with our brand and marketing teams on some of those other partnerships. I partner with our HR team, our people team on some of those other relationships, and then our sustainability team on others. And so in other companies, including Mondelez, that is actually money that sits in those budgets. It's not centralized. And so you're right, there would be 4 or 5 different people you could be reaching out to. But I think the relevant piece of that is there's lots of different business priorities where there might be a fit for the work that you're doing. And I don't oversee our foundation, so I don't have any pure like philanthropy in my budget. I'm working purely on corporate giving, which means it's mutually beneficial relationships, right? So we're looking into partnerships that are having a positive impact, meeting a community need, and we balance that with also benefiting our business and also being core to our brand purpose. So it's this triangle where all 3 need to be in balance, or else it isn't a successful corporate giving partnership for us. And that's kind of how we have it structured, which might be quite different than how Chipotle has it.
Can I ask you?
Pretty similar, but go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you one question to, when you say you partner like with HR or partner with, can you give an example of what that would look like? So like in what kind of case would you go, oh, this needs to be a partnership with HR, or this needs to be a partnership with sustainability or whatever?
Yeah. So I have money set aside in my budget for our ERGs to be able to help direct in order to meet some of the needs and the priorities that they've set aside. So all of our ERGs have a community goal. And so when I'm working with HR, it's us kind of collaborating with our ERG leaders on how our giving can support their DEI priorities in our communities. And so that could be focused on like a talent pipeline priority, or that could be focused on supporting an organization that their team is passionately volunteering with. But that's maybe an HR priority. On the sales side, it could be looking at knowing that Walmart is very passionate about food waste, and is there like a relevant way for us who also care about food waste to be collaborating with them on a nonprofit or cause that they care about?
Great. And ERG is Employee Resource Group, is that right? Or, okay.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, I know in corporate, we use different acronyms sometimes, so, Lisa,
Mhm. Yes, and employee resource groups, and I remember when these when we started calling them employee resource groups, and for everybody else on the line also, that we have groups here at Chipotle like Hustle, which is to support women in career development, and we have a Pride ERG as well, and we have an ERG around just building culture here. And so a lot of sports activities, getting, the employees to go out and do something fun together. And as Louisa mentioned, we also have giving that's specific. And I completely forgot about that bucket until you were talking, Louisa, that HR does manage for some of the ERGs as well. And so for Pride, for instance, of giving to very specific organizations that support those efforts during Pride Month. And again, different elements like on the Hustle group of supporting like women's groups that the ERGs may propose for the company to provide some funding to. There are a lot of different buckets as well here at Chipotle, and to exactly that point of some of the funding does sit within sustainability. And so we do have, like, I own the budget on the giving that supports and that we collaborate with nonprofits to support our environmental goals that I mentioned earlier around climate and water. The marketing and brand team also has their own budget as well. And so we have different avenues for giving there. So there is giving when guests come to a restaurant, you can do the roundup program where, it's the typical, you round up your change and then that pot is collected, and there are specific organizations that we might highlight, nonprofits that funding will then be directed to. So maybe like this month or Earth Month, you would have a nonprofit that's really focused on environmental issues, and that really spurs, and one of those nonprofits would be highlighted. Whereas year round, we may not necessarily highlight one nonprofit, but may have that pool collected, and then the funding will go to a nonprofit that really supports our vision of cultivating a better world. And when we think about cultivating a better world at Chipotle, it really falls under like 3 pillars and around our ESG goals. And that's around people, food and animals, and the environment, or people and planet. And so that's where the roundup funding would go to for nonprofits. We also do a lot of community fundraisers in the local school, having a dine out program where a lot of that is given back to the local organization. And that's another way of giving. And then finally, we also have the Cultivate Foundation as well. And so And as Louisa and Melissa had mentioned, there's just multiple budgets and different teams. And so we also work with the marketing and brand team. I do, again, when we're looking at different brands that we're collaborating with or different vendors that we have products in our restaurants, and really seeing where we can align our goals and the way that we want to support nonprofits that may have the some of the other brands that we work with may also have like a 1% giving piece within their company as well. And so are there ways that we can collaborate that overlaps with our business priorities as well?
Lisa, I have a follow-up question for you also. How would an organization like for example, the Roundup program, like how do you pick those organizations? Like what if I have an organization that's like, we think we're perfect for that program? Like
Mhm.
how do you find them? How do you decide? How do organizations get on the radar for that?
That's a really great question. In many different ways, actually. And so we get ideas also for different organizations from our suppliers, our vendors, and also within just teams at Chipotle, um, providing that tee up of that organization. We get direct outreach in our different inboxes. And so it really just depends on that organization. Like we'll review them and see if they do align, like are they meeting some of the strategic priorities that we have for that specific giving. And then it's a lot of conversations after that as well, of vetting that nonprofit, like what are their strategies, how are they deploying the funds, how much is going through administration, how much is going through direct programming, and then eventually, if everything aligns, then we will feature that nonprofit within our Roundup program.
Great, thanks. There's actually a question in the chat that I think would be helpful to just insert right now. Stephanie, I'm going to throw this one to you. Can you explain the difference between a corporate sponsorship and a corporate grant? And if you're like, no, I can't, I'm
Yeah,
happy.
I can give you what I would, from my background working with multiple brands, what our perception of that. But please, panelists, my co-panelists, jump in. But I think in general, when we refer to a corporate sponsorship, it's much more of an exchange of we are going to sponsor X in receipt of or in relation to receiving Y. And so it's much more of I'm going to receive something, whether it's a logo recognition, whether it's mentioned in a press release. So it's much more of an exchange. And usually that sponsorship is a specific point in time. Whereas a grant is, yes, we will give you a grant and we might need an impact report or a specific result. So I know the lines are a little blurred, but I think in general, the language might be a little bit better of assuming when corporate sponsorship, there's usually a more of a specific outline of what are you going to do for the corporation in return for sponsoring versus a grant. We are granting you X dollars and we would like a report of your impact or whatever. I think that's the simplest way to explain it, unless my co-panelists might jump in with anything else that would have additional light to it. But I think that's kind of the basic.
I will also just say for smaller nonprofits, and I'm not an expert in this, but legally they're like just being really clear on the limitations of what you're actually giving in return to that company and not overstepping those bounds, because you are mission driven and your nonprofit status is protected by the fact that you are pursuing that mission. And so if a corporation is asking you to step outside of that or to do work that is not in pursuit of your mission, then it is not appropriate. And just want to flag that for everyone here.
Thank you. That's good note, Louisa. And I will say different companies have a different blend of how much is sponsorship quid pro quo kind of giving and how much is just pure charitable. And you can even hear with these different perspectives and different companies, how much, there's giving that isn't necessarily specifically supporting the company's work. Like, in Valerie's case, like giving to a lot of children's organizations isn't necessarily about banking, but that's charitable work that they're doing. And I find this one super interesting. All right. Thank you for that question. I think it's a really important distinction. Especially as people map and think about the corporations they want to approach. All right, in the interest of time, I might just ask, I know Stephanie, you shared already a little bit of an example of a nonprofit partnership or corporate giving relationship that worked really well at Crocs, and the different layers of it. I would love, Valerie, why don't I throw this one to you? Do you have like just a really, there's different levels in corporate giving. Like sometimes it's just like, here's a little grant, go do your thing. Or, here we're giving some Cliff Bars to your event, knock yourself out. And then there's like these things that have layers and layers of engagement at multiple layers of the corporation. And I think PNC, you have quite a few of those. Do you have one to share and how that works? And then, but really, the most important part is how does that develop? Like, how do organizations get to that point of like deep partnership and engagement with your brand and your company?
That's a really good question. I saw Jackie Arditi on the call today, so I'm going to shout out her organization, which is the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, which is a small museum in Escondido. It really focuses on sort of providing kids, really coincidentally, kids ages 0 to 5 with STEM education, arts, and a whole host of other support and services, and really encourages cognitive learning and development for young minds. So it is, and this relationship was, they're one of our longest partners. So we've only been in market for 3 years, and we have been supporting them on the sponsorship side, on the grant side as well for the past 3 years. And it was a relationship that's really been very authentic and organic, and a relationship that's really kind of developed over time through trust, and really a great deal of collaboration. So as we sort of started at PNC and we were assessing sort of the overall landscape for early childhood education, we really honed in on the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum. It's a smaller museum in Escondido with a smaller budget, and we really felt like our commitment to the museum could really be transformative in many different ways. And so we, over the course of 3 years, we have funded everything from their mobile museum, which takes the museum to rural and urban communities and provides access for children who can't afford, again, because of transportation or cost to physically come to the museum. We've also supported Access for All, which provides free admission to families who can't afford admission to the museum. We've sponsored their STEMposium, which is an annual event that really focuses on how to teach educators and museum leaders and others about the importance of STEM education for young minds. It's really been kind of a wraparound sponsorship as well as grant partnership. We also have folks who serve on the board. We have a couple of folks who serve on committees. Our organization is also very committed to volunteerism. So we have a partner through the PNC Foundation. PNC will provide an organization. PNC will specifically provide an early childhood education organization a grant for a certain number of volunteer hours that we accumulate with that organization. So for every 40 hours of volunteer time, in our case, the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum will get a grant. I think over the course of 3 years, we've committed over 1,000 hours of volunteerism to the museum. That's everything from their nature nights and their space nights to people serving on boards and on committees to putting together kits for different events. It's been a whole host of different things. As a result, we've also, separate from the grant side, because of that sponsorship side, we've also developed a banking relationship with them. But it's really been a very broad-based, holistic, very collaborative approach. We also have greatly appreciated learning a great deal from them when things don't go well. And they're very honest about the fact when things don't go well. And so for us, it's like, how can we sit down together and how can we try to resolve or fix, or how can we help? And so our team is really, it's a very holistic approach in terms of how we wrap ourselves around organizations. And the Children's Discovery Museum is just one example of that. And so it's an organization that we've been continuously proud to support over the past 3 years and will continue to support over the next several years. So that is just one organization that we have really kind of wrapped ourselves around very holistically here at Yancey.
So I'm wondering, I know I'm going a little bit off script here, y'all, but thank you, everybody. You're all such pros. So how does an organization, this is great, Valerie, for just getting a picture of all the ways that engagement happens with the museum, and how does an organization, like, what are the steps that they should take to becoming like your corporate bestie? Like what are, how, I know all of you have a couple of these, right? A couple of these like corporate deep partnerships, but Louisa, I'm looking at you, so I'll throw this to you. What should organizations do? Like, how do you initiate the beginning of that? Like, what's the path from I've never met you to like your deep engagement?
It kind of depends. So for example, if we're talking about like a brand values activation, usually we are seeking out a very specific organization for a very specific impact and cause. But some of those have grown from much smaller organizations that we already support into those partnerships. And I would say those often start from employee passion and connection. Like a lot of times, if we're supporting an organization at a smaller scale, that may have come to us via an employee who volunteers with them or serves on their board, or maybe, we know that we've got a lot of volunteer hours going to that organization. I think from just also knowing like the pressure that a lot of companies are under right now with budgets. This might not be true to anyone, but I know for us anyway, like we get a lot of pressure and push to focus as much as we can, and so do often find ourselves supporting fewer organizations at a more like substantial wraparound level. And so for most of those, they are organizations that we've sought out through our own research. But that's not always the case. And I'm trying to think of a good example. But I do think the employee connection is a good start, thinking about some of the lower lift ways that a company can support you, like in-kind donations, for example, like a good foot in the door, and finding that that place where maybe it's not the huge multi-year partnership that maybe is in your dreams, but it is a nice way to get your foot in the door, get them to know more about your mission and the work that you do.
Lisa, I would love for you to also feel this one. And would you say for Chipotle, are employees like a key way to start a relationship with following the interest of employees, or what are some other ways these kinds of partnerships develop at Chipotle?
Mhm. I would say also both. There are, I would, even right now, there was an employee that was very passionate about a nonprofit and did a lot of the legwork with the nonprofit of understanding like what their mission is, how are they driving change, and what type of programs are in place, and really teaming that up and saying, hey, this is someone we should really look at and this is why. And so if you didn't have that very passionate employee that's like getting you the foot in the door, I would also recommend that it would still really be kind of that email and really laying out like, how does your organization really align with the business values and the goals of the company that you're approaching. And there's some cases where, you know, it may seem like everything aligns. I mean, but really thinking about the scale and scope of the company as well. We are like Chipotle, we're a global company. However, the majority of our footprint and our restaurant operations are in the United States. And so when we're getting solicitations from organizations that may be serving on a much larger international scale, that isn't what we're focused on. We're really focused on North America. And so again, those are the types of areas to really focus on when you are soliciting out to a company. And then I think really to grow that relationship on, especially in my world, on environmental sustainability, and a lot of the nonprofits we support are supporting larger goals of the company, is just a lot of the data-driven pieces, like how do you show your work with specific metrics and deliverables, and versus, and it shouldn't be in a way where you're like, wow, this is a lot of work and we're not doing it and we're only doing it for this one company. But we are really looking for those numbers to really show how we're, you know, how we're able to partner with organizations with very specific impacts.
Great.
I think, Alyssa, just I would say part of the skills that underscore these relationships that Valerie and Lisa mentioned is the ability to not just once you've secured a partnership, but really being very, very intentional of continuing to build the trusted relationship. It's like the work really probably ensues once you've secured the relationship. And so there's an intentionality. There's also patience of, you know, touching base, developing the relationship, and asking good questions. And don't be afraid to ask the hard questions of, we've really appreciated this first year relationship. We're very excited about the potential of growing a relationship, or at least strengthening it to where your needs are. Could we meet? How, you know, how are budgets looking? Do we need to have an honest conversation? Would love to do that earlier rather than later, and kind of touch base. And if you have a new program, or you're thinking of, or you have a new partnership that you've created, let them know about it. And so it's kind of, once you get your foot in the door, you still have to keep knocking. And that, you know, is effort plus authenticity, plus not being afraid to ask some really pointed questions. I think that's, in my opinion, I've always found those relationships are, oh, great. They're willing to listen. They're willing to work with us depending upon how things are changing. So I just want to underscore the skills of realizing what those examples would be.
Stephanie, thank you so much. It's so funny. I was literally about to go to you almost exactly for that. So thank you. I think there's kind of like two parts to this, just like any fundraising, right? It's cultivating somebody in and then growing them once they're in, and how to continue cultivating them, right? And so what I want to just let people know about Stephanie and I met because we were co-trainers for something together. And Stephanie is I'm going to just say the word beast, like an expert, amazing, like beast in the best way, of a fundraising consultant and coach. And so I love being able to hand it back to you to kind of break things down also in the translation of like, what does this mean and how do you actualize it? So Stephanie, I'm actually going to ask you another question on that tip. So I'm going to just kind of scroll back to the cold outreach part, right? So how do you do cold outreach with a corporation? Somebody just asked, I keep hearing that a corporation will be seeking an org to partner with. What is the research process and where do we need to be found? That would be the best case scenario, is like you are found proactively by a corporation, but usually we find that, you know, as nonprofits, we're like banging on the door of Cliff Bar saying, please let me in. How do I get here? Or whatever. Like, how should I do that? Why don't people ever answer emails when I send my cold email out to a corporation? Like, what's happening on the other end? And how do I get seen? Should I be sending an email? Should I call? Should I stalk people at events? Like, what should I do?
There's a lot in that question. There really is. I'll lend my perspective, and then certainly, again, my co-panelists could please add to that. I definitely think email is, if you can find it, is one of the best ways. But please know, just one email will not do. We get hundreds of emails a day, and so often it's buried in that. And I have to also say, before you send any email, you have to really figure out, is there a fit? What's the alignment based on at least what I know that email reflects you've taken the time to look at anything related to their giving, anything related to a press release of another organization they funded, that you have a thoughtful ask and outreach to them that shows I'm reaching out to you based on your commitment to, and your empowering women, or your commitment for play, whatever it is, that you lead with, that you've taken the time to hear what they're doing, then you follow with why it matters to them. So if you think about this, that pitch a fit, it's the opposite of what we cringe at when our kids are pitching a fit, but basically you want to pitch the fit first in that. And often I recommend leading with your impact first. And I know that this will sound odd, but often I get a pitch that might say, hi, Stephanie, I'm reaching out to you. I'm a part of, I've worked with this organization, the Cand-Aid Foundation. And we build bikes and skateboards for kids so it starts with who you are in the program. And then you finally get to, that really, engages, mobilizes community volunteerism and employee engagement. Flip that to say, I'm reaching out to you, through our ability to mobilize in, community volunteerism and employee engagement by, you almost have to lead with your best foot forward of your impact. And I think that that's kind of helpful when you're thinking about the outreach. But sometimes instead of just saying, how do I reach out to companies, it really should come with a little bit of homework and matching, and sort of having an understanding, do I have a fit, before you have an outreach. Otherwise it will show. I'll be very honest. There's so many emails. I'm like, they have no idea who we are, what we're doing. And I might pay more attention to not responding to anything they've ever said than somebody who's taking a little bit more time to lead with fit first, follow with your highest impact, why you do what you do, and then how you do it. And it kind of builds a little bit better, but I think that sort of pitch the fit, but knowing email, sometimes if you're local, it's in an event. Valerie, you got these local events, somebody might, go to some of those events. It's okay to, if you think about how you want to, there are multiple ways in the door in that case. I know I was a lot at you, but I don't know if anyone else would want to add, or you can contradict for sure. It's okay.
No, Stephanie, I love how you framed that, because that is what draws my attention when I look at an email. And like I mentioned before, just that impact of metrics, like, save us that mystery. This isn't find out more by having a conversation with us. Like, let us know exactly what it is that your organization is able to do and offer, and what it is that your mission is, and that scale. What's that sense of scale and reach that you have? Because the last thing that we all have our very full plates of going and searching to find more information about your organization to determine if we're going to establish a relationship. And if all of that is there, and maybe it's not a great fit too. And so that may be a reason why you might not be getting a response, because it isn't a fit. And so, or it may be that it's going to a spam. I will say that Chipotle has a very aggressive spam filter. And I do not get a lot of emails that come through. It just gets held up in space until I go in and have to activate another email box to release things. And so, really putting that impact forward, I think would really help you to establish that relationship.
Yeah, and I'll also just quickly echo, I think your patience is also greatly appreciated. I know this is something I've shared with our panelists, but like when we came to market, we were very assertive in market, and we did a lot of sponsorships and a lot of giving, which we've continued to do, which is wonderful and fantastic for all of us here locally. But as a result, over the course of 18 months, we've probably received more than 2,000 requests for funding. And we're fielding I'm fielding about 250 emails a day. So I just simply don't have, with all honesty, don't have bandwidth to answer every email. But I will sort of share a particular situation that, kind of to Stephanie's point, like had somebody done their research, it would have avoided a great deal of, I think, chaos and frustration. So over the course of 2 weeks, I got 12 emails from one person asking us if we would support this capital project. And I think with just 5 minutes of research, what they would figure out is they don't work at an organization that we naturally would partner with, and we don't support capital projects. And then they needed the request to be funded by June 1st. So, and the first email came on May 15th. So like, just, I guess be cognizant of like, we, for the most part, and I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on this, like we typically require at least months of months to deliberate. Particularly if it's something where our name is going to go on an event or a sponsorship, or we want to be able to reap all of the rewards and the benefits that you have so graciously agreed to provide us. So I would just say, if you could if your patience is greatly appreciated. I think following up, I think to Stephanie's point, a lot of times one email doesn't do it, because to Lisa's point, it's probably going in our spam folder, or we're just kind of trying to kind of get through the day-to-day. So that is just something that I will add to both of those comments.
Thank you. And Louisa, do you want to add something here too?
I mean, I think I totally align with what everyone said. And I think you're all pros at understanding your audience and just knowing that your corporate giving audience are like small teams getting a lot of requests and a lot of pressure, especially if it's not on the foundation side, but that it needs to deliver a business value. So when you're thinking about crafting your message, like as people said, leading with that value that you believe is the right fit. And I also, again, just like if you can find out where your volunteers work and use them as an avenue into, right? Like if you went to that volunteer and you said, John, like you've been coming regularly, would you be willing to like send an email to your corporate giving team? I will always respond to that email every time. And I think everyone else here probably does as well. And so that's one angle that I think is helpful to think through.
That's phenomenal advice. The chat is really alive with like specifics around, and this is really, I think this is like, if I were coming to this call wearing my nonprofit hat, this is like the heart of the matter, right? It's like, tell me how to be successful in reaching out to corporate funders. Like, where should I go? How do I do this? So this advice is phenomenal. Thank you all. Some of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat, what channels should people be using? Is email generally the best way to go? If you're doing cold outreach, you're trying to connect, you don't have an employee to go through. I think that's phenomenal advice, Louisa. Like if there's an employee who who's connected, that is your number one avenue. But when you have people who are getting 2,000 emails, you know, in a week or whatever with requests, should you use email? Could you go to them and on LinkedIn? Like, what are the other channels? If you do go on email, how long should that initial email be? What's your best advice? Stephanie, I'm going to go to you. Think
I'll
everybody.
give you some of my guerrilla tips. And my co-panelist, you might be like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that, but I'm going to anyway. Here's some guerrilla tips. I've done a few times where if I can't find an email, but I've done my research around who the person might be in community giving or corporate giving or in general, but I don't have an email, I'll search and scour every imaginable press release that they have written. And I will read them because I want to know what they care about. I want to know, I'm doing a lot of research while I'm doing this because I'm finding a fit first. Do I feel that I have a reasonable understanding? And in my heart, do I feel that there's a fit? Then I keep pursuing it. But I'm really looking for, does the bottom of that PR give me the email format of somebody in the company? Is it first initial, last name? Is it first name underscore last name? I'm looking for an email format. Sorry, this is just what happens. The guerrilla nature of, hey, so I might find a format and then try the name that I know who that person is to then, and I probably for emails, sometimes that one email might take me 30 minutes to write. They're very, very intentional because one, I believe there's a fit. Two, I'm going to take the time to have a subject line that makes sense. Hey, if I know I have 200 emails, what is going to really be professional and succinct and interesting? And then I'm going to format that where I'm at least going to include a link. Don't leave me guessing. I don't want to have to read this whole thing and not know where to click or what I'm going to do. Don't send me an attachment. Often as a corporation, we can't open attachments. So that's not going to work really. I've got firewalls. I don't want to open anything. And give me a couple of bullets because you may have 30 seconds of my time. So that's kind of a little bit of the guerrilla, how I might find it. And then how, as a recipient, how I'm going to read this in that case. I have had LinkedIn pitches, to be honest, many, and I briefly read them if they have done a really thoughtful, if they know somebody I know, or really been thoughtful of, hey, would you have 30 minutes, 10 minutes, or could we connect to learn more about your program here, your commitment here that we might. So there has to be an indication of a fit. So those are at least a little bit of inside scoops, if that's helpful. But again, my panelists, please weigh in on anything that resonates differently or the same.
I think for us, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, my email is online. So it's not hard to find me. You will find me and you will also find emails for my 53 counterparts. I think because in PNC's case, they want to be very clear as to who oversees the philanthropy and the sponsorships in every particular region so that you're not going to everybody else. So I think that's why I end up fielding so many requests by email. I would say voicemail is the least effective way to get a hold of us because it's challenging. Similarly to Stephanie, email and I do get quite a bit of LinkedIn messages. I think we're doing our best to respond, I think, to everything as it comes in, but I think patience is just really critical.
Anybody else have thoughts on what, Stephanie, that was gold. So thank you. Louisa, Lisa, any thoughts? Or are you like, no, don't do that?
I mean, I will sometimes click a link to a short video if it's going to summarize their mission really quickly for me. So if you have one of those golden videos that is succinct, you know, like, and if you can tell the person how long it is, like, watch this 30-second clip that captures what we do or whatever it is. It's good clickbait, and you might give us an easy way to learn more about what you do.
Yeah, just I can say wearing my Dr. Bronner's hat. I know I'm not a panelist, but I will share that we do get a lot of solicitations over email. Um, and I think Lisa spoke to this earlier, but I really want to underscore it. Um, Sometimes people will say, we really want to discuss a partnership and let's get on a call. And like that's just really very unlikely to happen when I have 30 seconds to when I don't know who you are, why you will support an initiative that we have, or if it's, the homework is really important, leading with the impact's really important. And I can say that usually if it's like a request for funding and you're saying let's have this partnership, I'm like, just say that you want funding. Like we don't need to have this, what do you mean by partner? Like sometimes I'll write back. Some of you might have even gotten emails from me saying, what do you mean by partnership? Like what are you talking about? Um, so be direct and succinct, and know that people are going to read your email for 30 seconds. So try to figure out how you're going to hook them in that 30 seconds with fit is kind of the summation advice I would have on that. Okay, there is so much in the chat. I'm loving the engagement. Let's do this one. What time of year do you recommend reaching out? Any thoughts on that?
I will say, just from some of our experiences, and this is also a part of the research side of things. And you guys can tell me differently, but if your companies are usually looking also to spend some of that budget in Q4 of their fiscal year. And so that's when your projects are either falling through or are not making the cadence, or you're looking for another project. And then also planning for the next year, because you're also doing your budgets for then, your 5-year plans, and that all occurs usually in your Q4. But then the fiscal years of every company is different. Some folks are on calendar years, some have different fiscal years. And so really, again, to Stephanie's point of doing a little bit of research of, when does that occur, when to do that outreach versus, I think, right in Q1 is usually difficult for me. I mean, we're just like rolling things out. We're, kind of just getting our plans in place. And so that initial, especially if you are a new organization, probably not going to get as much traction in Q1. And then I'll just add to that outreach piece also. Agreed with Stephanie and Melissa and everybody else on the LinkedIn, no on the phone calls, but also another place to find some information. And you'll be surprised at how often that we are looking at the general inboxes. There usually is somebody in one of the general inboxes that are looking and forwarding emails. If those emails look like they should come to me, like if it hits the general communications inbox, they'll send that over my way. And there's also information on how to reach out to the company. If you're a publicly traded company, usually on their investor websites, and where there's also a lot of information on the values and what the company is really trying to strategize and prioritize.
I want to just go back to this question around corporations seeking people to partner with through research. And so I'm wondering, does your company have an open way, do you accept solicitations? Is there an open way for people to approach or pitch? Is there an application? How do people do that? And do you proactively research organizations to fund? I'll let whoever wants to start on this one.
We generally do not request we do not want unsolicited applications because we don't want you to go through the time, energy, and effort to submit something that we potentially might not fund. So we actually proactively seek nonprofits. I think having come from the nonprofit sector, I have a very good understanding of what organizations are out there and who is falling within our priorities. I do also connect with my fellow corporate philanthropists here in San Diego. And especially if we have aligned funding priorities, are there opportunities for us to collaborate? Are they funding somebody that we should potentially know about? And so we have funded organizations based on recommendations from other corporate philanthropy partners. We do all of our due diligence and research. We're looking at board, we're looking at staff, we're looking at financials, we're looking at everything before we even connect with a nonprofit organization. So there is a great deal of due diligence on our end that typically happens before, but we typically, if organizations have proposals that potentially would align with our areas of giving, I mean, I think to everybody's point, they're welcome to send an email focused on impact first and then everything else, but otherwise we don't accept unsolicited proposals.
And somebody was asking Valerie, when you say we don't accept unsolicited proposals, does that mean people shouldn't cold email you, even though it's not a proposal, or they still should do that? You just won't ask for a proposal unless you want one.
Correct. So we use a system called CyberGrants. Our CyberGrants portal is public. And so we've gotten so many unsolicited proposals. Just organizations said, yep, we want to work with you and partner with you. Here's our proposal. But there's been no conversation, no calling, no meeting, no why are you a fit for us? So in that respect, we don't accept unsolicited proposals. But if you email, yes, I'm happy to sort of follow up and have a conversation to see if you might be a fit if you are part of our funding pillars.
What about it?
The only thing I would add in terms of quote unquote, does a company do their research or research? I think just as professionals, we are also scanning, for example, at Crocs, I'm scanning the trades, what's happening in footwear around what partnerships. I mean, I'm aware we're going to conferences, we're listening to panelists, we're understanding what do other successful public-private partnerships look like? How did it start? Like, so we're, as professionals, always in curiosity mode. So we're not really doing research, but we are absorbing a lot of what other partnerships are out there. So what that might look like for you all is, don't hold back on celebrating your successes. Don't hold back on promoting or sharing. If you have a partnership that you feel has been successful, there's a real trusted relationship or a shared value, celebrate that and try to get that out there. It's a part of also just sharing how it worked, lessons you've learned, what community mobilization techniques worked with what you tried. So it's not just saying, yay, we just now got a $50,000 grant or whatever. Try to build the success around what you're trying to accomplish or what you've learned as news. So the news becomes an indirect form of research for, if I'm on the corporate side looking for, wow, okay. So that's another option for you all, is, try to, when you're celebrating successes, frame it and not just you secured X dollars from so-and-so for this program. Try to frame it in a way that, what is the partnership about? What are you trying to solve? What techniques will you be using? Those kinds of things become a form of research for other folks to find you.
Yeah, Stephanie, I'll just add to that. So one of the organizations that I found was I was listening to NPR driving to work, and they were talking about a project that they were successful at. And I reached out to them and we partnered with them.
Great advice. Louisa, anything you want to add on this one? Okay. I'm trying to keep up with all the questions. It's amazing. And Louisa, I think you've been answering some questions in the chat. Thank you for doing that. That's so fantastic. There was a question quite a while ago. Sometimes corporations say they don't grant to religious nonprofits. What about religious nonprofits that are doing general social good work? How would you frame that if you want to, if a company is saying we don't fund religious projects and you might be have some religious underpinning, but it isn't about the religion, how would you recommend people frame that to get on your radar? Who wants to take that one?
So I know, Cliff will sponsor faith-based non-religious organizations. And the differentiation there is that if the reason the organization comes into being was based off faith, or that's part of their mission and underpinning, that's they're doing important work, that's great. But if part of their mission is also around like proselytizing or serving just their congregation, then that falls outside of the scope. But I will also say that now being part of a much larger company, like huge companies are so risk averse. Like it's just easier for them to make a simpler decision. But if you do still feel like it's a fit, I think, focusing locally is probably the better way to go in that case. And emphasizing that you serve beyond your congregation, or that you're meeting a full community need. So for example, like our largest disaster relief partner is a faith-based organization, but they have an enormous impact. They're huge, but they also do just like work that is really valuable to our world, and we see that and know that. And so I think there are ways in the right fit, but I do think we are very cautious and careful about making sure that line is very clear about who they're serving and why.
Great. Okay. I think we have time for, thank you. Christina just dropped the evaluation link in the chat again. Thank you, Christina. Please make sure to fill that out. 30 seconds, I promise. It's so quick. Okay, I think we have time for like one more question. I'm going to just take this one right at the bottom because it speaks, I think, to cultivation. So if a corporation gives an unsolicited donation to our nonprofit, how can we conduct outreach, or I think really, like, what are some of the ways, and I think Stephanie, you spoke to this a little bit before, what can we do to cultivate that further than just sending a thank you note? Like, especially if it was unsolicited? Anybody want to start on that?
Well, beyond a thank you, I just have to tell you, what did you tell us? What did you do with the money? Like, instead of thank you for the gift, at the very least, put in your cultivation practices, have a midpoint. This is our progress being made. And, we're coming up to a year, or, and here's what some key results and findings or insights. So it's the thank you is just the start, but at least you have a midterm touch. Even if it goes unanswered, you have a record of that. But it's sometimes it's a formal impact report if you have a substantial gift, but at least a note of here's how your money has really helped XYZ in many ways. And so that's sort of the bare minimum, I think.
Any other thoughts? Like, what do you all like to see from organizations that you're partnered with, maybe on the lower level, where it's just like a really simple partnership? What do you all like to see from those organizations, especially if you might fund them again? So let's say it's year one, you've given them a small amount of money for something, what can they do to get that increased for next year?
I mean, I think Stephanie's point is the most important piece is what did that funding enable to happen? And, if it is, like this word sounds so obtuse and over the top, but like catalytic funding, right? Like if it is funding that enabled you to unlock additional funding or do something, that is powerful to hear. But I also put in the chat, like I think also giving a quick next follow on, like is there volunteer opportunity coming up that they can send out to their employees and get people excited? Because maybe if this is unsolicited, maybe it's like a matching gift or something that an employee recommended if you didn't have a relationship already. So it might be that that's how that started. And that if there's a quick follow on to just hook them in a little further, I think that might be successful.
That and those were the last words. Thank you, Louisa Brown. We're at our time. This went so fast. This was so interesting, and I hope people found this to be as valuable as I did. You all just brought so much wisdom and just like the brass tacks, like this is what you do, this is how you do it. And I think that as fundraisers, that's what we really need. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's been here and for this whole time. We really appreciate it. We will do some follow-up. You will be receiving a follow-up email. Feel free to come off of mute and say thank you in your own voice or some like rounds of applause. But Valerie, Louisa, Stephanie, Lisa, thank you so much for not just the time, but just opening your hearts and wisdom and behind the scenes insight to everybody. This is really, really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
organizing that.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you so much for organizing this. This was really fun, and I'm grateful to have met all of you. So thank you.
We're a good team. You guys were amazing together.
Well, I think that has to do with our moderator who sort of put us
That's
all
right.
together.
Absolutely.
I'm lucky. So, you all have really good chemistry too. So I loved it. Beautiful.
For having us.
Yeah, stay in touch, any of you, if there are opportunities
Absolutely.
for collaboration.